Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. With Stranger Things Season 5 coming out on November 26, or if you're in Australia like me, November 27, I wanted to take a moment to explore some of my own theories and predictions in time for the upcoming final season. Now, some of these theories might be a bit controversial, but they're all based on years of foreshadowing, character arcs, and subtle clues the Duffers have been planting since Season 1. So grab a snack, sit back, and let's dive in. Before we get into predictions, we need to talk about foreshadowing. Like I said, the Duffers have been planning the series since Season 1, so every scene, every prop, even small background details are deliberate. The Duffers have also confirmed that Season 5 circles back to the beginning. Now, I firmly believe that Season 5 is going to feel a lot like Season 1, but on an apocalyptic scale. Season 4 for me is my least favourite season. It's the only season where the group is physically divided for almost the entire plotline. We jump from Hawkins to California to Russia, and even though the stakes are huge, the emotional through line gets spread thin. The heart of Stranger Things has always been in the friend group together, with the nostalgic bike rides, the walkie-talkies, and the sense that the world is falling apart. However, the kids figure out piece by piece. Season 4 just doesn't capture that as strong as the other seasons. That's why I think Season 5 is returning to that original atmosphere. The show's tone would feel grounded again, darker but more character focused. There would be no more disconnected plotlines or separate locations, and with all the marketing centering on Will Byers, it feels intentional. The show began with his disappearance, so it only makes sense that it ends with him too. With that same small town mystery energy, just scaled up to the little end of the world.
It was a 7. It got me.
Alright, so here's my first theory I've been thinking about. Vecna is what took Will in Season 1, not the Demogorgon. And before watching Season 4, that would have sounded impossible. But now that we know that Vecna created the Mind Flayer, controls the hive mind, and manipulates victims through psychic hallucinations, suddenly everything from Season 1 starts to make terrifying sense. Also, with Will's sensitivity and his connection to the Mind Flayer, it would all make a lot more sense if Vecna actually took him back in Season 1. The signs are all there.
He's lying! He's lying! He's lying!
My first bit of evidence is that it wasn't actually a Demogorgon Will sees when riding home. However, the creature he sees on the road just stands there. It doesn't chase him, it doesn't roar, it doesn't sprint, it simply just watches him. That alone is very weird because every Demogorgon we've seen behaves like an animal. They're aggressive, instinct-driven hunters. They don't stalk from a distance, they charge, they kill. Moreover, they're attracted specifically to blood, which Will doesn't have any of that in that scene. If that figure were a Demogorgon, Will would have been dead within seconds. Instead, the creature behaves calmly like it's observing him, and that matches Vecna's behavior perfectly. Vecna studies people before he strikes. He watches them. He invades their minds. He selects his targets intentionally, not randomly. So the figure on the road acting nothing like a Demogorgon is another strong clue that it wasn't one. It was Vecna. Furthermore, the behavior of the lights further supports my theory. When a Demogorgon is near, the lights flicker chaotically and erratically, exactly as seen in Season 1 during Nancy, Jonathan, and Steve's fight in the Byers' house. Demogorgon interference is messy, violent, and uncontrolled. Vecna's influence, however, creates slow, rhythmic, pulsing light fluctuations. This pattern appears every time he attacks in Season 4. In Episode 1 in Season 1, when Will runs into the shed, the single overhead light flares brightly, then slowly dims, which matches Vecna's signature energy spike before he strikes. Not the frantic strobing linked to a Demogorgon. Also, the shed door unlocks by telekinetic powers, and Will experiences the visions and atmospheric distortions that later become trademarks of Vecna's psychic influence. These details align far more closely with Vecna's methods of stalking and selecting a target than with the Demogorgon's predatory behavior. Taken together, the light pattern, the telekinetic door movement, the visions, and the hive mind connection that later defines Will's link to the Upside Down, the evidence supports the reveal that the Mind Flayer was Vecna's creation. So if Will was the first chosen host, that means Vecna marked him long before anyone else realized. To continue on from that, when Will vanishes in Season 1, he doesn't die instantly like Barb. Instead, he survives for a whole week in the Upside Down. He somehow avoids the Demogorgon, and even communicates with Joyce through the lights. That's not normal prey behavior. That's someone being preserved. And when Will returns, he doesn't come back screaming about a monster. He comes back changed, quiet, he's sensitive to heat.
He likes it cold.
And then, in season 2, he becomes connected. The Mind Flayer infects him like instantly. Not like a new host though, but as if Vecna was picking up where something was left off. Spoiler warning for those who haven't seen the new trailer, but the season 5 trailer also hints at this.
You are going to help me. One last time.
This line is spoken as Vecna levitates Will towards him, suggesting that Will has helped Vecna in the past and will do so again before the show ends. The truth is, Will wasn't random, he wasn't unlucky, he was chosen, specifically targeted, and spared by Vecna for a reason the show has been quietly hinting at since day one. Building on that, I think Will carries residual powers from Vecna, not in a possessed way, not in a villain turn way, but in a narrative mythological sense. Since season 1, Will has been the only character to survive direct prolonged exposure to the Upside Down and to Vecna's hive mind. And in stories like this, surviving that kind of supernatural force always leaves a mark. It's not corruption, it's a scar, like a fragment of Vecna's consciousness was burned into him. And we've already seen some hints towards that, such as Will feeling cold whenever Vecna is near, the way he senses the Mind Flayer before anyone else.
He's back.
The season 5 trailer shot where Will clutches the back of his neck, almost like something is awakening, and the fact that the Mind Flayer's creation is directly tied to Henry Creel, meaning Will's connection is by extension a connection to Vecna himself. And when you look at it through a D&D lens, which the dubbers always use as a framework, Will fits the archetype of the marked hero, the character who was touched by the monster and comes out changed, not evil, but bound to it in a way no one else is. So in the final season, Will might not just be a victim or a vessel, his connection could become a weapon. He can feel what Vecna feels, sense the Upside Down, maybe even influence it in ways. Not enough to control it, but enough to make him essential to the final battle. Okay, here's one of the most widest series I've got, but the deeper you go, the more it actually holds up. In the D&D campaign made by Eddie, Vecna is famously known for returning without his left eye.
He is not only missing his left arm, but his left eye.
It's one of the most iconic pieces of D&D mythology, and the Duffers have never used D&D references lightly. Every monster the kids name end up symbolically mirroring its D&D counterpart. So when season 5 posters dropped, us fans noticed something strange. Both Vecna and Will have their left eye shadowed out. Now, on its own, that could be a stylistic choice, but when you compare it to how the Duffers framed symbolism, especially with lighting, it really becomes interesting. Vecna losing his left eye in D&D represents losing vision and control. So imagine this in a narrative sense. What if Will is that missing piece? Not literally, but symbolically. Since season 1, Will has been connected to the Upside Down, but never fully consumed by it. He maintains empathy, humanity, identity, everything Vecna doesn't have. So the shadowed left eye becomes a visual metaphor. Will is the missing eye, the blind spot in Vecna's power, the flaw in his design. It's not about Will being damaged, it's about him being crucial. But imagine if during the finale, Vecna actually loses his left eye, which would parallel the D&D campaign in season 4. We all know that the Duffers love parallels after all. Now, let's talk about the monster. My prediction is that the season 5's ultimate creature is going to be the Cecil Hydra. Take Will's dragon painting on season 4. On the surface, it symbolizes his love for Mike. The painting depicts Mike's D&D character leading the party in a fight against the Cecil Hydra, a scene meant as a romantic gesture for Mike. But Will's hesitation and subsequent sadness suggest his fear of rejection and the emotional weight of his feelings.
These past few months, she's been so lost without you. It's just she's so different from other people, and when you're different, sometimes you feel like a mistake. But you make her feel like she's not a mistake at all, like she's better for being different. And that gives her the courage to fight on. if she was mean to you or she seemed like she was pushing you away, it's probably just because she's scared of losing you, just like you're scared of losing her. And if she was going to lose you, I think she'd rather just get it over with quick, like ripping off a Band-Aid. So yeah, Elle needs you, Mike, and she always will. Yeah? Yeah.
But here's the thing, the painting also works as a multi-layered foreshadowing, and with every major monster in the series being a D&D parallel, it's completely possible we'll see the Thessal Hydra fighting alongside Vecna in the final battle. Also, the original monster the kids used to symbolize the threat in Season 1 was actually the Thessal Hydra.
It's not the Thessal Hydra.
I'm telling you, it's the Thessal Hydra.
The Thessal Hydra!
So imagine this, all the shadow particles that make up the Mind Flayer merge at the height of the Upside Down, Vecna at the center, controlling it like a puppeteer, and what emerges in Hawkins is this apocalyptic three-headed shadow dragon. Okay, my next theory is that the Lost Sister episode is crucial. It is one of the most misunderstood and overlooked episodes in the entire series. People love to skip it, but I've always believed it's important, and if my D&D theory is right, Season 5 might prove that this episode was never a filler episode. It was foreshadowing, because when Eleven meets Carly, that's the first time Elle truly steps into herself. Carly just doesn't teach her a new way to use her powers, she teaches her independence, identity, anger, and control. She teaches her that power without emotional grounding is dangerous, and that connection to others is what stabilizes psychic ability. This brings me to the D&D parallel. In Season 4, it opens up with two simultaneous games, the Hellfire Club's D&D campaign and Lucas's basketball championship. In D&D, the kids can't defeat Vecna until Erica rolls a natural 20, the highest possible outcome. In basketball, Lucas is player 8, and Carly is subject 8. The numbers aren't random, they never are on the show. 8 represents balance, duality, and a mirrored counterpart. And if we follow the D&D crosscut as symbolic foreshadowing, the idea that the party can't defeat Vecna without the perfect roll, then here's the theory. Eleven won't be strong enough alone in Season 5. Since she wasn't strong enough to defeat him in Season 4 as he managed to escape, so Elle won't be able to fight against Vecna in his final form. Moreover, whenever Elle overexerts her power, she bleeds, collapses, or burns out entirely. It happened in Seasons 1 and 2, and most dramatically in Season 3 when she lost her powers altogether. So imagine this. To stop Vecna, Eleven needs 8 as the key to the final battle, because if Vecna is evolving into something bigger, then the only way to counter him might be through combined psychic strength from Eleven and Carly. Now let's step away from the big plot theories and dive into the character arcs, especially Mike, Eleven, and Will. I'll be honest up front, I am a Byleth shipper. I love for it to be endgame, but before anyone attacks me in the comments, hear me out. This isn't coming from a place of hating Eleven. I actually think Eleven was important and love what it meant for Elle's journey. I just believe the story has been building towards something richer, something that makes more emotional sense. Violet just hits different, and now I'm about to explain why. Let's start with Mike, because honestly, his arc is the one that risks falling apart if Violet doesn't happen. Throughout seasons 2 to 4, we see a pattern in Mike's behavior, overperforming as Elle's boyfriend, obsessing over being needed, and emotionally distancing himself from Will. On the surface, this can make him look selfish, but when you dig deeper, there's a much more coherent explanation. Mike grew up watching a loveless, dysfunctional marriage between Ted and Karen Wheeler. He learned early on that love is performative, so he overcorrects. He tries too hard. He plays the role of boyfriend in the same way he plays paladin in D&D. He performs what he thinks love is supposed to look like instead of expressing what he actually feels. Mike finds security in being essential. That's why he clings so hard to the idea that Eleven needs him. His identity is built around being her anchor. And deep down, he's terrified of her becoming independent, making decisions without him, or outgrowing him. It's not because he doesn't care about her, it's because he doesn't know who he is without being the person someone depends on.
I dump your ass.
However, if Violet doesn't happen, then Mike's arc gets messy. He risks coming off as poorly written. His inability to say I love you to Eleven wouldn't have had a meaningful explanation. His coldness towards Will, especially in seasons 3 and 4, would seem like a needless cruelty rather than repression.
Destroying everything, and for what? So you could swap spit with some stupid girl? Elle's not stupid. It's not my fault you don't like girls.
And in the moment in season 4 where he finally tells Elle he loves her, but only when she's literally on the verge of dying would feel hollow. Like he only said it because he felt pressured or because he needed to play hero again. It wouldn't resolve the tension the story has been building for years. But if Byla is endgame, suddenly everything fits. Mike's behavior makes sense through the lens of internalized homophobia and emotional repression. His hot and cold dynamic with Will becomes the classic narrative of a character pushing away the person they care about because they care too much and don't know how to deal with it.
Meanwhile, Elle has like a book of letters from you.
That's because she's my girlfriend, Will.
And us?
We're friends. We're friends.
His fear of losing Will, the jealousy in season 3, the constant defensiveness whenever Will's feelings come up, they all become deliberate storytelling choices, not inconsistencies. And explains the emotional truth behind his silence, why he couldn't say I love you to Eleven, why he felt the words would be a lie.
You lie.
Why do you lie?
This monologue was complex on so many different levels.
You're the heart. Okay, remember that. You're the heart.
Elle, I don't know if you can hear this, but if you can, I want you to know I'm here, okay? I'm right here. And I love you. Elle, do you hear me? I love you. I'm sorry I don't say it more. It's not because I'm scared of you. I'm not. I've never felt that way. Never. But I am scared that one day you'll realize that you don't need me anymore. And I thought that if I said how I felt, it would somehow make that day hurt more. But the truth is, Elle, I don't know how to live without you. I feel like my life started that day we found you in the woods. You were wearing that yellow Benny's Burgers t-shirt, and it was so big it almost swallowed you whole. And I knew right then and there, in that moment, that I loved you. And I've loved you every day since. I love you on your good days. I love you on your bad days. I love you with your powers. I love you without your powers. I love you for exactly who you are. You're my superhero. And I can't lose you. Okay? Do you hear me? I can't lose you. You can do anything. You can fly. You can move mountains. I believe that. I really do. But right now, you just have to fight. Okay? Elle, do you hear me? You need to fight.
But what I want to focus on is how here, Mike finally breaks the friends don't lie core principle, which ends with Hawkins under siege. The party lost for the first time when Mike lied. Friends don't lie is a foundational principle of the show, and deep down, Mike knew saying those words to Elle wasn't honest. This demonstrates that Malevolent is parallel to the world's end. He loves her, but not in the way that she thinks.
But you don't love me anymore? Who said that I didn't? You never say it.
On the other side, Mike's confession to Will that befriending him was the best thing he's ever done contradicts both monologues, as it calls Will to help signal the group to close the gates, ultimately saving them.
Buddy, I had no friends. And I just felt so alone and so scared. But I saw you on the swings, and you were alone too. You're just swinging by yourself. And I just walked up to you and I asked if you wanted to be my friend. And you said yes. You said yes. It was the best thing I've ever done.
This means that Byla is paralleled with saving the world. Now let's look at Will. His arc is quieter, but just as important. In season 3, he says,
I'm not gonna fall in love.
Okay.
and in season 4, he reflects,
When you're different, sometimes you feel like a mistake.
These lines show that Will struggles with feeling unlovable, partly because of his sexuality, and partly because of the trauma he's endured from the Upside Down. He has carried this self-doubt for years, and if Byla doesn't happen, that self-doubt remains unresolved. Will's fears that he is unworthy of love would linger, and his arc risks feeling incomplete. He wouldn't see that his feelings are valid, and he deserves connection and acceptance. But if Violet does happen, it becomes the perfect resolution. Will's suspicion about being unlovable is proven wrong. He is cared for deeply by Mike. His feelings are reciprocated. And crucially, his sexuality is never treated as something wrong. It's just part of who he is. This gives his arc a satisfying emotional payoff, a quiet but powerful affirmation that he is worthy of love and belonging.
I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm going crazy.
Me too.
Hey, well, if we're both going crazy, then we'll go crazy together, right?
Yeah.
As Millie Bobby Brown said, Eleven's main arc this season is about breaking out of the mold made for her by the men in her life, which includes Hopper, Mike, and even Brenna. Seasons 3 and 4 showed her stepping into her own identity, discovering her powers, and asserting agency far away from Hawkins and the expectations placed on her. So if Violet doesn't happen and 11 is canon, that independence is undermined. Elle's journey gets tied back to Mike, her growth filtered through his need to feel important. Her arc becomes about giving him security rather than discovering her own strength. It risks leaving her story unresolved, powerful yet tethered, still measuring herself by the standards others set. But if Violet does happen, 11 would be gone for good. 11 will be independent for the first time, making her own choices, defining her powers, and finding meaning in herself without anyone else determining her worth. She will no longer need to fit into the two criteria Mike planted in her head: superhero and monster.
Everyone looks at me like I'm a monster.
Well, they just don't know you.
You think I'm a monster too.
What?
Her arc will become self-contained, satisfying, and empowering. Her breakup with Mike in season 3 wasn't just teen drama, it was necessary to happen. 11 needed space to grow, and Mike needed to confront his own fears and insecurities. And if season 5 mirrors this, a similar separation could happen again, giving them both room to evolve before any final resolution. Breaking up isn't failure, it's growth for 11. Lastly, the finale we will likely see is the collapse of Hawkins, the Upside Down destroyed, Will finding closure, and 11 achieving independence, as well as the kids moving forward. So those are all my Stranger Things Season 5 theories for now. Let me know your predictions in the comments, and if you want more deep dives, analyses, and filmmaking breakdowns, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.